All right, it is Monday, June 10th, 2024, Human Design Catalyst, and tonight's topic is the planetary Enneagram. We're going to do the Enneagram of personality through the lens of the planets with connections to astrology and human design. But just before we started recording, Rachel was saying that Enneagram really had its heyday in the mid 2000s. Is that true? I didn't realize. I mean, I guess that makes sense. I didn't really learn Enneagram until like 2014. That's when I got into it.
Well, all I have to say is that, like, so I'm an astrologer, and any metaphysical thing, if people are like, "Oh, you're an astrologer, do you know about Enneagram?" Like, so I've been studying astrology since 2007, and I have been completely checked out of reality from 2004. So, like, I don't have social media except for YouTube, which is just totally one way. And I don't watch the news. I'm very isolated. And so it's like when I meet people and like I get a vibe of something, I feel like, oh, this is really strong, like in the collective, or this is really fringe, one of the two. And so like a lot of people started mentioning Enneagram to me around, like, I would say, yeah, between 2010 and 2020. It had its peak in my mind. Like, you guys say this is a system that has existed for thousands of years, and that's news to me. I felt like it was modern. So it's like I am like a complete like novice. I don't know anything. I don't even know my own number. I think it's 5, but I'm not even sure. But like, so like a lot of people are like, "Oh, Enneagram, Enneagram." I'm like, I don't know shit about Enneagram. I'm so sorry. Like, but I am not a person that ever discriminates between anything. I'm like, oh, like I'm totally open to hearing more about whatever weird thing it is. But I am curious to hear about the origins of it and why I but don't you remember in 2023, like USA Today came out with the shit that said Enneagram is out and human design is in? They're like
Yeah.
on, you know?
Yeah. I mean, Enneagram goes through phases, and I think it's probably at the absolute peak popularity ever, as a ton of young people who aren't into astrology or human design or anything mystical are nevertheless crazy about Enneagram. So just here in Santa Fe, there's a whole group of people in their early 20s who are like super into Enneagram that would never have any connection to astrology or anything like that because it's, you know, okay boomer kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, so we can do a more general Enneagram. I do want to relate it. This will be the idea is going to be the planetary Enneagram. And so I'll just share the kind of conventional Enneagram of personality here. These are the common names. I'll also just say, to give a little context, that I am a huge fan of the Enneagrammer site and the people they have on there. They have a number of Enneagram professionals who've kind of come together, in my opinion, as the real canonical source of Enneagram knowledge, clearing up decades of wrong information and decades of wrong knowledge. And it is also bringing it back to a lot of its source in Gurdjieff, or Gurdjieff as he's called. And so G.I. Gurdjieff was a mystic, really interesting guy. He's an Enneagram 8, so he was a challenger. He used to love to challenge people who would come to dinner with him by giving them an animal nickname. So all night long he would call them like, "Okay, rabbit," and they'd be like, "What?" He'd be like, "Oh, you're such a rabbit. Look at you, so scared like a rabbit," you know. And he would just get under their skin and kind of get them to like get a reaction out of them, and then they'd have some sort of catharsis. He looked at Enneagram in a very deep mystical way that actually included like mudras and body postures and dances. You would actually emulate the different Enneagram types, embody them as 9 archetypal energies. It's very much like astrodrama, kind of psychodrama stuff. Like, I don't know, there are some astrologers who will have parties where like you have to come as your Venus sign. So I have Venus and Leo, so I'd have to come as like Venus and Leo all dressed up and like gold baubles and stuff. And, like some Venus and Scorpio would show up as the Don Juan or the Femme Fatale or things like that. But anyway, very similar to that. He would have people do this kind of psychodrama, and it really does have a deep, deep connection to the planets. And that's what we're going to look at today. So I think I'll just do a brief kind of talk, maybe just 10 minutes, and then we'll just kind of open it up and see if we can figure out what Enneagram type people are, if they already know or if they're interested. And then maybe we can look at some of the new breakthroughs in Enneagram. But the first thing is that there is a commonality of the repetition of the triads of Enneagram and the awareness centers in human design. So what I mean by that, the first triad we'll look at is 8, 9, 1. So 8, 9, and 1 are considered a group here. Here at the top with 9 in the middle, 8 on one side, 1 on the other. That's usually called the gut triad or the anger triad. And that is physical. These are very physically oriented people. So if you're an 8, a 9, or a 1, you tend to be, very oriented to the physical plane as opposed to the mental or the emotional. So this would be the spleen in human design. And the meditation or prayer, there's a guy named Richard Rohr out of Albuquerque, and he's actually a Franciscan monk and a religious scholar and kind of theologian and things like that. And he claims that the mode of prayer for the gut types is silence. So if you're at 8, 9, 1, you don't sit and meditate. You don't do some propitiations or rituals. You just have silence. You go on long walks. You go out to nature, stuff like that. 8 and 9 and 1, very physical. Kind of makes sense with the spleen being fundamentally about survival and fundamentally about hearing, because hearing is the way that we survive if you hear danger, and silence being the mode of prayer, and the sort of existentialism of being in the now, in the silence of the spleen. And it's astrology for people who think they're too smart for astrology. Definitely well said now. And then Rachel, you love astrodrama. Well, we will do some when we meet. And I haven't sent out the HDHD emails yet. I'm in the process of doing that, but you've been accepted for your full scholarship if you didn't already know that. And you have a ticket, so we'll talk about it. I'd love for you to come, and then we'll do some sort of. We'll have to figure that out. So, we had a whole scholarship program, and we got like 60 applicants, and we did a combination of ways of determining who gets tickets and what they're going to do. And anyway, I'll detail all that later. But looks like we will all be meeting. I know Now is going to be joining us, right? And Rachel, Casey will be there. Well, is everybody? Nancy's gotta come. You've got to join. So, although I think in discussions with Nancy, maybe we figured that a longer trip is in order and possibly a different time of year. But either way, you put in the volunteer application. Okay, wonderful. Well, I thought you were already on the list. Didn't you buy a ticket now? Am I confused about that? There are so many we had like 60 applicants. Either way, I'm assuming you're coming. So one way or another, you're coming for sure. I thought you already bought a ticket. I guess, was I confused about that? Well, either way, then I guess maybe I have you on the volunteer list. I apologize for being a little bit scattered on that. But either way, I'm expecting you both to be here in September. So it's going to happen. So did you not? You didn't buy one? Okay, well, you're on the list too. I definitely have you on the list of attendees. So I guess this is the announcement then, that you both received tickets to HDHD. So okay, well, and I sincerely hope you can both come. I'll be sending out the emails this week with a form that you'll have a few weeks to fill out to kind of confirm, because some people who applied might not be able to come after they apply, stuff like that. But you'll be getting an email with an intake form that just says, "Congratulations, you've been awarded a ticket. Please let us know anything we need to know," and so on. And you'll be getting that very soon. I'm in the process of sending those out. Absolutely. Well, so very excited. It's really coming together a lot. Just a brief update on HDHD, I guess. I don't know how many people I should announce. We have a lot of speakers that I have not yet announced, so I guess I will hold off on that. But very excited to have some big name, older guard people that have never been to HDHD before joining. So we're going to have some pretty big names this year. Not that anyone's a small name. I mean, everyone has things to offer and things that are cool. But I had it was a fourth line day, or at least it was earlier, and so I had a bunch of conversations with various speakers earlier on the phone. Doc Yam is going to be returning. He's doing 3 presentations, including one that's projectors only on 9-centered communication. He's doing another on the art of waiting and human design fundamentals, and then he has a third one that was pretty interesting sounding too. And so I talked to Dietrich Rudat. She's coming back. She studied with Ra from 1996 on. So she's, really, really, really wonderful speaker, and she'll be presenting. And but some that aren't confirmed that I will hold off on announcing just right now, just so it can be a big surprise. But we're pretty excited. So okay, as far as Enneagram, and the idea behind it, I mean, there's really a lot of different histories of it. It was used in Sufi mysticism. It was used by Gurdjieff. It was popularized by Claudio Naranjo or something. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different people that have kind of contributed to its history, but I really like the Enneagrammer group. So if anybody does get into it, check out Enneagrammer. They are a subscription service. It's not that much. It's $20 a month, and even just like for a month or two can be a great way to learn the system. And it's just a great group of people. And they also make a lot of stuff available for free. But I really like how much they have kind of. It's almost like now we've finally in 2024 cleared up all these misconceptions, similar to what happened in Myers-Briggs and like Jungian psychology. Same thing with Enneagram, where it's really cracked wide open. And hi there, Lasita. I know you are also a practitioner of the Enneagram. I was just kind of showing my main source of Enneagram information, which is Enneagrammer. It's a pretty great group, and they have a guy named John Lukovich who I actually interviewed. He's on my YouTube. I don't know why Zoom would be closing for you, Hanifa. Maybe you got to try on the phone. Sometimes I just connect on the phone for if my computer's messing up, or vice versa. But they've done a lot of new discoveries, and it's like a lot of things have just only come to light in like the last few years. Like it's kind of amazing how something so old, it really is this time of revealing and of the veils being lifted. And one of the things people have discovered is that actually, so it's like in the original Enneagram, you just are one of these types. And then people realize there's actually tri-type, where you can have 3 of these numbers. They can't all be in the same triad, but one from each triad, one from each section of the Enneagram, basically. And then what people realized is that a lot of the people that identify as one of the unusual types they're not actually of that type. They're actually one of these really common types. The 3, the 6, or the 9 are by far the most common. You see that they form a triangle. This peacemaker down to the achiever over to the loyalist kind of just forms a basic triangle. And that these are like the fundamental triangle of like 90% of humans. And so most people who think they're an 8 are actually a 3 or a 6 or a 9 that just happen to have 8 in their tri-type. Most people who think they're a 4 are actually a 3, a 6, or a 9 that happen to have 4 in their tri-type. And I'll explain that in a moment when we go into that. But it's just kind of amazing that there's such a renaissance in Enneagram typing just in the last few years. And it's been really incredible just to watch that happen. It's really an exciting time to learn it. So how do you determine your Enneagram? And is this related to the Tesla 369? Oh yeah, good answer from Lasita. It's recommended to read each of the descriptions and then to take years over filling it out. Yeah. I mean, sometimes you'll find one relatively quickly. Sometimes people take literal years. I mean, there's an Enneagram expert I know from Seattle who took about 5 years to determine her type. It really was, and it really did move between 3 or 4 different ones as she kind of learned different aspects of it. But I'll just we'll go over them, and I can explain, since this is in the context of human design and astrology. So the first thing, the connection to the awareness centers of human design. 8, 9, and 1 are part of the gut triad. So 8, 9, and 1 are 3 different ways of dealing with the physical world, and that relates to the spleen. 5, 6, and 7, these are the head triad, also called the fear triad. And 5, 6, and 7 all relate to the ajna. It's the mental world. There are different ways of handling the mental world. Like you can see in the physical world, the 8 will challenge the physical world, the 9 will try to make peace in the physical world, and the 1 will try to change the physical world. When we get to the mental, the 5 is going to investigate and learn everything they can about it. The 6 is going to be loyal and stick with what's trusted. And the 7 is going to keep trying to explore new things. They're called the enthusiasts here, but they're also real like aficionados, or kind of they appreciate the finer things and so on. And then we get to the emotional triad, which is called the heart triad, or it's all about feeling, and we have the helpers, the achievers, and the individualists. And these are three ways of dealing with shame. And so we'll go through each of these, and you might, by the end of it, even figure out some inkling of which one you are. You might be able to figure it out just from the descriptions, or it may take years, or you may identify with one only to realize that that's part of your tri-type, but that's not actually the core fix for who you are as a person. So just as an example, in the gut, I have a 1 fix, so I'm a reformer. That is my primary type. In the head, I have a 6 fix, so I'm a loyalist. And that's kind of how I deal with fear, is by staying true to what I'm loyal to. And then in the emotional, I'm an individualist, and that's how I deal with shame and how I deal with value and self-worth and things like that. And so I'm what's known as the 164 tri-type. And if you actually Google tri-types, you can see that each of the tri-types have nicknames they've been given. Just a minute here, 164 tri-type. And then you can find people, yeah, here's people talking about the 164 tri-type. This is, I'm somewhat of a perfectionist, so I try really hard to be ethical. I have a strong sense of right and wrong. I'm focused and goal-oriented. I highly value security, and I'm prepared for the worst. Hardworking, trustworthy, always doing everything I can to kind of make sure that I'm safe and secure. And then the individualist. I'm characteristically introspective, expressive, and I desire to be unique, valuing authenticity and personal expression. Yeah, just let me know if there's any cutting out. The microphone is being adjusted differently. Maybe it's the mic this time. Oh, it was you. Okay, well, I'm like holding the mic here, so maybe moving it around is messing up a little bit. I don't know, but in any case, the tri-type kind of makes it a little bit more complex, but also in some ways almost easier to type, because one of the first problems people have is they see themselves in many different types, and it's like, well, actually, yeah, we do see ourselves in many different types. There are aspects of us that exist in many different types. Like if you're a 2, the helper, then that's your fix in the emotional, the 2, 3, 4. But you're still also going to have an 8, 9, or 1 fix, and you're still going to have a 5, 6, or 7 fix. And so what I would just say is let's go through each of the triads, and I'll just explain briefly how each of the types handles that fundamental problem, and then we'll look at the relation to the planets. Okay.
Can I ask a
Yes,
question?
please.
Fiona, if one arrives at a tri-type, do you have to say them in a particular order? Is that consecutive, hierarchical in some way?
It is, although besides the first one, there's been a question of whether the second and third are ordered, but I think they are. I mean, it really depends how nitty gritty you want to be. I identify as a 164, and so I believe that I'm a 1. That's my primary fix. 6 is my secondary, and a lot of people actually see 6. They sometimes see 7 because 1 grows to 7 also, and it's kind of next to 6. And then 4 is kind of my least. I'll show, if we go in the database here, there's a really interesting celebrity database of people that have been officially typed by the Enneagrammer class and by their, it's like a really extensive database, as you can see. And as an example, the most similar type to me, who's the same Myers-Briggs type as well as the same Enneagram type to me, although we do have a few differences. He has a different social stacking, as it's called. But it's a man named Rafe Fiennes. It's pronounced Rafe, not Ralph. Everyone says Ralph, but I'm sure he hates that. And, I'm not saying that we're doppelgangers of each other, but we have a certain similarity in our approach in many ways. And there are some significant differences. He's a self-preservation type. I'm not. I'm missing self-preservation. He has a 2 wing, so he's more of a helper. I have a 9 wing, so I'm a little more checked out and so on. So I'm not saying that we're the exact same type or anything, but I'm just saying like you can at least find people, we're kind of cousins in a way. Someone who's like a cousin of mine in the same neighborhood of personality as me. So yeah, Rafe Fiennes, his sister Sophie Fiennes makes great films as well. He can play me in my movie. Wonderful, wonderful. If Jason Segel isn't already, since he's the other guy that looks a lot like me. So okay, so in my case, I am a 1 primarily. Now let's look at 8, 9, and 1. And then these are three different ways of dealing with anger. The challenger expresses anger immediately. They are unable to bottle it up. It's known as the id type. The id has very low impulse control. The id type, the whole idea is that the id is this broiling cauldron of instincts. And I will say that the vast majority of people who identify as 8 actually just have 8 somewhere in their tri-type. It may not be the first one, but there are true 8s. Von Paul, the artist, is a pretty much confirmed 8, where a number of people who know Enneagram very well have all agreed. And as an 8, he loves challenging people. Usually when he's smoking, he's actually right next to a non-smoking sign. You find a lot of very strong, dominant people who are 8s. And part of their thing is that they really have low impulse control, and they basically just express things right away. So if a car goes by and almost hits them, they start yelling at the car and kicking it immediately without any reflection. Most people, again, who identify as 8 are not actually 8s. They actually just have 8 somewhere in their tri-type, because most people have better impulse control than that. And yeah, you might love that 8 low impulse control. Sometimes it'll annoy you. It annoys all of us at times, right? So I don't have 8 anywhere in my tri-type. I'm pretty far away from 8. I'm not even in the neighborhood of 8. I'm a 1-6-4, so I don't even have the 7s or the 9s that kind of get in the proximity of 8 and could have 8 wings. People like the 8 because the 8 is the classic bad boy, the bad girl. It's Bart Simpson. Bart Simpson's the classic 8. 8s are very popular. They're rare and they're popular because they're the class clowns and they're very dominant and strong, and they basically kind of intentionally flex their strength in various ways that, shows that they are dominant. And basically the 8 says, I'm okay if I'm strong and you're okay if you know I'm strong. It's not that they're necessarily wanting other people to be strong. In fact, when two 8s meet, they often have a bit of an alpha contest to see which one's going to win out. But the 8 is fundamentally about dealing with anger. And how do they deal with it? They deal with it directly and immediately. If you take their apple, they take it back. They don't wait to get revenge. They don't complain to somebody. They don't go to an authority figure. They don't try to get you in trouble. They just take it back. Yeah, they like weak. Well, sometimes. They don't mind strong as long as the strong knows they're stronger, right? They punch right in the face. Well, they certainly can. Yeah. Yeah, 8s, we have a lot of actors and like kind of famous leading people that are 8s, like Harrison Ford. Well, actually, he's thought to be a 9 now. Maybe a 9 with an 8 wing. So you do find 9s with an 8 wing who look a lot like 8s because they have that 8 quality. The wing is sort of, they're kind of, the fundamental issue for that person would be the 9. So they fundamentally would suppress their anger, but then they would express it more than other 9s would. So these are 3 ways of dealing with anger. The 8 essentially expresses it immediately. The 9 completely rejects it and pretends it does not exist. And so they'll say, what anger? And then the 1 bottles it up, and the 1 sort of, oh, that's an interesting idea. You look like a number, like 1s are very upright, something like that. But no, there's, or you're saying just that all 1s tend to look similarly. There's certain similar things. 1s tend to be kind of severe and strict and stuff like that. I don't know that they actually look like the number 1, but it is kind of, maybe in that case they do. So the 9 is going to be how they deal with anger through ignoring it and rejecting it. And then the 1 is going to use anger as a motivator to reform and change things. So they're going to get angry about something and then want there to be some actual change. They don't want to just express the anger because then nothing changes. They want to actually make a big change. So it's kind of like an 8 is just going to blow up on the person. The 9 is going to pretend it doesn't exist and walk away. And the 1 is going to like tattletale or go to the police or go to an authority figure, get them in trouble some way, try to prevent them from ever perpetrating it ever again, get them locked up. I'm an Enneagram 1, and I tend to bottle up and not show my anger and then get revenge, which is not always the most attractive thing. One's the revenge of the 1 is kind of a dark side of the 1 because the 1 tries to be so moralistic and it kind of needs to learn forgiveness. 8 doesn't have a problem learning forgiveness. 8 needs to be forgiven usually. So yeah, Bottle Up and Explode, a great song by Elliott Smith. There's a good cover of that. Yeah, I mean, when I say ones bottle, I mean, it's not, they want to use the change as a motivator. They're not always bottling up, but the stereotype for the one at a lower level of expression is the very constricted person who really wants to be sexually free, but they're not. So they criticize others for being sexually promiscuous. And they want to be able to make a lot of money, but they can't ethically. So they criticize others who make a lot of money as shallow and superficial and so on. Yeah, eight is 8 is direct, but I'd also say that the vast majority of people that identify as 8, I disagree with that. So maybe that's me being a 1. The 1 is typically kind of, contrarian in its own way. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that all 8s are direct. I would say that all 8s are afraid of depending on people and afraid of being weak. And so growing old and like needing people and stuff is a really scary thing for 8s. And that most people that say they're 8s don't actually have that fear. Like I met a woman the other day who's an Enneagram consultant who said she's an 8 and there's no way she's a 6. She was obviously a 6, and she was positive she's an 8, and I can't just tell her she's not an 8 because it's very rude. So I just kind of let it go. But if it actually came down to it, I would say, I would say there's a pretty strong chance you're not an 8. You probably just have 8 in your tri-type. Yeah, okay, Trump is an 8. Absolutely. Trump's a real 8, and the very low level. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, 8s, what I'll say about them is they hate not feeling strong. They want to feel strong. The 1 wants to be right. So 8 is the classic Bart Simpson. And if you're an 8, Hanifa, then you would be ridiculing and making fun of teachers and classes. You would be cracking jokes and getting everyone to laugh and distracting and undermining authority figures at any chance, like Bart Simpson, being a prankster and a troublemaker. 1, on the other hand, is the good boy, the good girl, the goody two-shoes, who does the right thing, who has a strong ethical backbone, who stands up for things, who has a strong sense of right and wrong, and who turns in the class clowns and gets them kicked out and expelled because they're the ones who caused the ruckus. And yeah, problems owning vulnerable side. Yeah, I mean, that can be that's a good point for 8. I mean, they right, vulnerable. They don't want to show weakness. It's like, I'm okay if I'm strong, and they might think that, being emotionally sensitive or something is a sign of weakness, even though it's not. And maybe at a healthier level, they might even see that as a sign of strength and be able to be more vulnerable, but it can be really hard for them. Absolutely. And yeah, it can be hard to type ourselves. So yeah, 8 can be afraid of being controlled by others. I mean, they don't want to be dominated. So that's the whole thing, is like, but see, the 1 doesn't want to be controlled by somebody evil. The 1 is also afraid. They're afraid that if they are less vigilant, like 8s can be really negligent, very negligent. 1s can be hyper vigilant, and it's like, are they, yeah, are they vigilant? Are they, and so on. So, I mean, but in any case, and we'll get to the planetary archetypes, and then for those of you who have a background in astrology, like Rachel, it's going to make a lot more sense once you see the planets, because what you'll see is we're kind of grasping in the dark, trying to describe the planets. And you see that the planets have a vast range of expression. So when we get to the planets, yeah, it's going to have you this kind of, hopefully, this dopamine hit of like, wow, it all makes sense. Okay, so 8, 9, and 1, each one of us, no matter who we are, prefers one of these 3 somewhere in our tri-type, right? Whether if you are a gut type, if you are a physical type, then anger is your core thing. But even if you're not, even if you're a head or a heart type, 8 and 9 and 1 are still going to be somewhere in your tri-type. So I happen to be a gut type. As Richard Rohr puts it, that means I pray in silence. My prayer is silence. I go for long walks. I go into the silence, and that's how I feel connected to the physical. In human design, this would be the relation to the spleen. And 8, 9, and 1 are 3 different ways of dealing with anger. The 8 is kind of the bad boy, the bad girl. The 1 is the good boy, the good girl, the kind of goody two-shoes. And then the 9 is the peacemaker who's caught in between. And I'm a 1-wing 9, so I have a bit of 9 tendencies, but but I am actually a 1. So I was the goody two-shoes. I was not the class clown. I was the one who was annoyed with the class clown, who would tattle on the class clown and get them in trouble. I wasn't the Bart Simpson. I was the Lisa Simpson. They're the classic 8 and 1 archetypes. Lisa's the 1, Bart's the 8. So we'll get to the planets in a moment, Rachel, but I see where you're going with it. Yeah, she is a great jazz musician. Although there's some great 8s too. I mean, I think Charlie Parker was probably an 8. So, but John Coltrane, I think, was a 1. So it's just kind of, it's the good and the bad, right? It's the, leather jacket, Marlon Brando, biker gang, they're the 8, versus the cop, who's the 1. So each of us is either very heavily on the bad boy side, very heavily on the good girl side, right? Or we're the peacemaker, and that's by far the most common. The vast majority of people have 9 in their fix here, and 9 is one of the most common types. Not a bad thing. It's not like you need to be a rare type. It's actually just the kind of normal type to be. It's the normal one. Normal people aren't weirdly pranksters disrupting everything, and they're also not like weirdly anal retentive, uptight, obsessional. They're just kind of in the middle. So you could say that the 8 is the id, the 1 is the superego, the 9 is just the ego. Not the ego in a bad way, just the normal person. It's like, the 9 is kind of just the one that, the person that just isn't too good, isn't too bad, isn't constantly worried about doing the right thing, isn't constantly undermining other people and putting them down, like just kind of in the middle. And so most people who identify as a 1 or an 8 actually are 9s. And the 9 sees themselves in the other type. The 9 sort of includes everything. So the 9 can really easily see themselves in the 8, and they can really easily see themselves in the 1 and other types. So again, most people who think they're 1s or 8s are actually 9s. Okay, then we go to the 2, 3, 4. Yeah, the 9 is the Maggie. That's great. So if we have Bart is the 8, Lisa's the 1, 9 is Maggie. That's really cute. I like that. Yeah, and 9 is I'm okay if you include me. You're okay if you include me. They just want to be included. 1 is I'm okay if I'm right, or I'm okay if I'm perfect. I'm okay if I'm good. You're okay if you're right. You're okay if you're perfect. You're okay if you're good. So that 1 has this strong, I love this Simpsons Enneagram, this strong moralistic bent. It's almost like too much superego on the 1, too little superego on the 8. 9 is just right. It's a modern archetypal scheme. Yes, it is, Rachel. Okay, so 2, 3, and 4. So Lisita posted that after months, she had to agree with how a therapist typed her almost 40 years ago as a type 2. And yeah, the type 2 is the helper. And when we get to the 2, 3, 4, everyone, no matter what type you are, is going to have some way of dealing with matters of the heart and matters of emotion and what ultimately comes down to matters of shame. Shame and self-identity and how you take pride in yourself, too much, too little. Do you feel good about yourself? I mean, all these questions, matters of the heart and the emotional center. And if this is your primary fix, if you're a 2, 3, or 4, then your religious ritual or your prayer actually would be like real rituals, like actual like celebrations and getting dressed up in certain ways and performing rituals and parades and festivals and all sorts of, I guess sacrifice might be part of it. I mean, things that you actually do, like 8, 9, and 1. I'm a 1, so I pray in silence. 2s, 3s, and 4s, they pray by burning an effigy or going in a big parade, or like we have a lot of that stuff here in, here in Santa Fe. We have the Farolito Walk, and we burn zozobra every year, and we do all of these kind of ritualistic things. And so 2s and 3s and 4s, that's their primary way of connecting to the spiritual. That's their primary mode of prayer. And these are 3 different ways of dealing with shame. And how do you deal with shame? By having self-esteem. What gives you self-esteem? Well, if you're a 2 or a 3 or a 4, you're a self-esteem type. You're a type that's very attuned to your self-esteem. And you want to feel good about yourself. It might seem like 1 is self-esteem, but it's not. 1 wants to be good and ethical, and it's an anger type. So it's angry about how unethical people are. It's angry about how bad the world is and is trying to reform it. 2s, 3s, and 4s have shame. It's very different. But all of us, no matter what our type, deal with shame. How do I deal with it as a 4? So let's start with the 2. The 2 deals with shame by being a helper. And so the helper says, I'm going to help others, and therefore that will validate me as a good person. I will gain self-esteem by being helpful. And usually the I'm okay, you're okay is phrased as, I'm okay if I'm being flattered, you're okay if you're flattering me. So the 2, and again, most people, I mean, I'm not disagreeing, that you might be a 2, Lisita. I'm just kind of raising the point that most people who identify with 2 have it in their tri-type, but they're not actually 2s, they're 6s or 9s, because 3, 6, 9 is like by far the vast majority of people. You might actually be a 2, but one of the ways you can tell is that 2s are, the song of the 2 is, I work so hard for my partner and my partner doesn't see what I do. I do so much and I don't get any recognition for it. Almost sounds like a projector or something, right? I am such a helper and people don't appreciate me and they don't flatter me and they don't tell me how good I am. So the real 2s can actually be very aggressive. They dissolve to 8 and they have a lot of aggression hiding behind the help. It's like, I'm helping, but I'm helping, with strings attached, kind of. Now, the higher form of 2 does not help with strings attached. The higher form of 2, the kind of enlightened 2, is really just helping out of the goodness of their heart because they feel good about themselves by doing something good for the world, and especially if they have a 1 wing. Yeah, you can see the connections, how they each dissolve, they each grow. 2 grows to 4, 2 dissolves to 8, and so on. So anyway, the song of the 2 is like, look how much I do. Look how much I help. The 3 is the achiever. I'm okay if I'm being recognized for my achievements. You're okay if you're recognizing me for my achievements. So 3s, if you want to make a 3 really, really hurt, don't recognize them for what they've done. Make fun of something that they've spent 20 years working on. Like, make fun of, like, tell them that what they've done is worthless. Tell them that what they've done doesn't have any use, and they will hate you forever. Like, literally, the 3 just wants to achieve. They want to be recognized for their achievement. They're usually like they almost look like 1s kind of because they seem like really ethical and so on, but they're really more just like archetypal, like role models of the self in some sense. Like Tony Robbins is a 3, They're just achievers that are just kind of like, I did it and you can do it too. And they typically are very successful and they have achieved a lot in their life and they want to be recognized and respected for having achieved that. And so again, that's how they deal with shame. It's like the shame of being a human, the shame of having done bad things, or maybe not living up to their own standards or whatever it is. How do they make up for that? By achieving so much that you can never call into question their value. The 2 is going to help so much you don't call into question their value. Now, the 4 doesn't play that game. Yeah, the 3 is common. Absolutely. 3, 6, 9 are the 3 most common. So you find a lot of achievers out there who are really putting so much of their self-worth into achieving, that they have to achieve something, they have to do something. And if they don't achieve it, they failed at that, and they really have a problem with that. And now the individualist, that's what I have in my tri-type. I'm not an individualist, I'm a reformer, but I have that in my that's how I deal with shame. And the individualist doesn't play the helping game. It's like, I don't have value because I'm helping others, and it doesn't play the achiever game either. I don't have value because I've done a lot with my life. Individualist says, I have value because I'm unique, I'm different, and I'm authentic, and everyone else is fake. So at the extreme, the 4 can actually be the most narcissistic of all. They're almost like 3 forms of narcissism. 2 is like at the bad side. 2 is like the codependent narcissism that's like, or the co-narcissist that's like, I will make you depend on me so you'll see how valuable I am. The 3 is like the sort of classic image of the narcissist that's like, look how much I've done, look how good I am, look how much money I've made, look how much I've achieved. And then the 4 is, no, I disagree. The 4 is more of the borderline personality disorder, actually, Rachel. It's usually, it's associated with the 4. Because borderlines are kind of like, I mean, it's hard to generalize, but if we're talking about actual BPD, it's usually they have a strong sense of specialness and they have an inability to imagine other people you know, very much. They don't have a strong ability to hold alterity. And so the individualist becomes like very solipsistic, and they're like, I'm the only authentic one, everyone else is fake. I'm the only real one, everyone else. Like, I don't want to. I don't want to name names, but there's a prominent figure in the human design community that has raised some heckles and is an Enneagram 4. And while I get annoyed by them, I also like acknowledge that some of that is just the 4. Like 4s just, they can be the most incredible, brilliant creators of, you know, I think Carl Jung was probably a 4. Like they can be these incredibly insightful, deep people who have like the most authentic, real, like super high threshold for pain, for like emotional pain and suffering and going deep into the darkness. But then they can also, like a lot of 4s will actually, and it's pretty rare for them to actually be a 4, but like the real 4s will talk about how they love long distance relationships because they get to fantasize and be in the pain and suffering of deprivation. And then when they actually are with the person, they're no longer interested. They're just bored. You know, they're just bored because it's not as exciting. And yeah, it would be, yeah, definitely agree with you there, Rachel. It'd be interesting to look at that. And I'm sorry to hear that, Hanifa. But, you know, any of the types can be difficult. You can read about some of the difficulties if you go deeper into it. But the 2, 3, or 4, there are 3 different ways of dealing with self-esteem. And so because I have 4 in my tri-type, I'll just say I deal with self-esteem by basically being elitist, one-upping people, and kind of saying like I'm special and you're not. And that's a really ugly thing. Like at my higher level, I acknowledge that everybody is special and that what I've perceived as inauthenticity is actually authentic to them. You know, it's real to them. But the 4 can kind of turn up its nose and be like, I'm the only one who sees the real, and everybody else is like especially the 3s and the 2s, they have a hard time because the 4s often are not really that successful. They don't care as much to achieve, and they're not really helping others, so they don't really have like the same like networks and all this stuff. And so they can kind of be haters a little bit of like, well, you guys are only popular because you're superficial. You're only popular because you're not willing to go into the darkness and so on. So the 4 basically says, I'm okay if I'm in pain. You're okay if you're in pain. And you can tell someone's a 4 because to be their friends, and I'm not a 4, by the way, I'm a 1, so I don't do this. But I have a tendency, I acknowledge it because it's part of my tri-type, that I've noticed when I do meet 4s that at a certain point they test me to see my pain threshold. He said, what a shit number, really? No, but then it's like they make up for it by being like the best musicians and the best writers and the best artists. Like probably all your favorite writers and all your favorite musicians are 4s, and all your, you know, Jeff Buckley. I mean, we mentioned Elliott Smith earlier. He was a 4. I mean, yeah, it's good to give them all room. Very, very generous of you, Rachel. Okay, I love them. Yeah, see, I mean, it's like we love them, but they're in pain, and that's part of their whole thing because pain is real. Prince is a 4. There you go. Pain is real. And it's like, so they're like, I'm okay if I'm in pain. You're okay if you're in pain. If you want to be my friend, I have to see if you're willing to feel pain, emotional pain, if you're willing to be sad, if you're willing to go to a painful place, because then I can tell you're real and you're not just a fake friend and you're not just a fake person. So, yeah, Prince is Rachel's first favorite artist ever. Well, definitely one of mine as well. Prince is incredible. So there's actually in the reincarnation forums, there's a belief that Prince is the reincarnation of some other famous musician, and it was considered almost like D class A for someone to reincarnate as a musician again. It's like, give someone else a chance. Give someone else a chance. Don't just keep coming back. Yeah, I forget who it was. It was actually Mike who told me that. But it was funny because a lot of times people will like reincarnate in like different fields. Like a filmmaker will have been a famous musician, and it's
So I
reincarnate.
just,
Yeah.
sorry, I just want to
Yeah.
pop in on this because I know you're an expert on reincarnation theory and
I don't
all
know if
of
I'm an
that
expert, but okay.
stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I know you're like at
I'm a
least
researcher. Yeah.
an enthusiast about it. So I have like taken this thing in, like, I think it's from the Buddhist thing that there's 3 germs that you can take from one life to the next. Like that there's 3 things, seed energies, germs, they call it, that you can take from one lifetime and carry it over. So I've often thought like, oh yeah, astrology or some shit like that would be one of my germs. But like music would so be a germ, or like an instrument. And I have read a lot of weird channel material that have talked about how like this person has had this relationship with this instrument for many lifetimes or something like that. So like I
Yeah.
find that to be like really kind of like my like hairs on the back of my neck are raised when they say that like a musician can't be more than one lifetime, because like I know
No,
for
it's
a
not can't
fact
be. It was that it's like do something else. Like you were already. It's like one of the greats. It's
it, but
like
like
I think people think like Thelonious Monk was Johann Sebastian Bach, or they think Herbie Hancock was Mozart. It's almost
but
just
John,
like it's
you are a musician, and so
sure.
like, do you really think that it takes only one fucking lifetime to master that system? No, it doesn't. It like that's like one of the things. Also, astrology, also any of these like language, like there are things that takes many lifetimes to master. So that's why like they would be germ material.
Yeah, I'm glad Prince came back as Prince and didn't come back as like a scientist or something. But I mean, it's just kind of more like it's just a funny. I think they were being more funny than anything. They're a little bit like, okay, it's kind of like doping for like athletes or something. Like, okay, you've had like 8 lifetimes as like super famous musicians. Like, how famous do you have to be? Come on, like how much? But I'm still glad that Prince came back as Prince. You know what I mean? Like,
We all are.
there was obviously still work to be done. There was
We're
still work to
all
be done. Yeah,
so fucking glad. And he's
yeah.
like an amazing mutation of music as well. So
Absolutely, absolutely.
even
You know, Prince was here to change the face of music forever.
100%. Yes, we
I
need to have
yeah.
a Prince music night on Signpost.
I liked how well you're going to be here in Santa Fe, so we can do a little dance party. But I liked how in the Drake Kendrick beef, Drake always likened himself to to Michael Jackson. And then Kendrick started to likening himself to Prince. And then he had a whole, there's like so many in jokes and back and forth with like, okay, you're Michael
Right,
Jackson,
because
but
like
I'm
Michael
Prince.
Jackson is a known like child molesting
Yeah,
fucking
he made
like,
I
yeah,
think that was probably where
on
it probably went too. But I mean,
yeah.
that Drake is Michael Jackson and he's Prince, and Drake always loved and kind of would dress like Michael Jackson, and then Kendrick was more of a Prince guy, and so it kind of turned into like a Stones versus Beatles, you know, Mike Jack versus Prince. But of course, we're all on the Prince side here. And then to answer your question now, the reincarnation database is reincarnationresearch.com. So, okay, so are you a Stones person, Rachel? Is that the you probably you should see who the supposed reincarnations of the Beatles were, and you might not like that music either as much. I'm pretty sure Paul McCartney was said to be Vivaldi, so maybe you're not much of a Vivaldi
I
fan.
honestly, I only like George Harrison really out of the group, and some of John Lennon's like, and I like all of their, maybe this is because of my individual design. I like all their solo music a lot better. Like I am a huge Wings fan, and
Well,
I
what's
like,
funny is I don't think any of the Beatles, maybe Ringo is the only one, really liked. I mean, I think the Beatles are they obviously did something more than music. And I mean, if you want to talk about musical influence, like they were probably the most influential band of the 20th century. That being said, John Lennon didn't like being seen as a Beatle. He wanted to be taken seriously as a writer. And he really didn't. He wrote a number of books. And people don't really realize that because his music overshadowed his books so much. But anyway, there's a lot of we can do a whole Beatles night. There's a whole mystical side of the
I think
Beatles.
that's really interesting because they are such a like a iconic cultural icon, and I think that the reason why I'm like fuck the Beatles, why like their songs aren't that great, is because of my own like individual thing or whatever. But
Well, you might have four in your tri-type. That's the individualist, right? The individualist is very much like I don't like what other people like because I'm special and I only like special and I don't like normal, and there's a whole I'm not saying you are a four. I wouldn't assume you are, but I'm just mean like that could be part of your
well, like
tri-type as well.
honestly, you're like a severe musician. Like you know for a fact that the Beatles songs are okay, but they're not that great in comparison.
Yeah, I mean, it depends what you mean by, they're not technically, but I'm really a John fan. I get George Harrison. I like that he brought Ravi Shankar, but I do see John as, I see Paul McCartney as sort of the great songwriter where, I mean, there wouldn't have been Pet Sounds if it weren't for Paul McCartney, right? Like Paul McCartney was the big inspiration for Brian Wilson, Pet Sounds, which to me is kind of like one of the
Which
greatest albums of all time.
so
And
amazing. And I like
yeah.
love the Yoko Ono, John Lennon stuff the best, like Double Fantasy and all that weird shit when John was in his, is he a 6 line? Like, I wouldn't be surprised. But
Wasn't he a 5? Oh, what is he actually? I don't remember. Yeah,
I have no idea. But
I've
anyway,
done some Beatles dives before, but in any case, looking at the Enneagram, I'm pretty sure John Lennon was a 7, and I'm trying to remember. I think George Harrison's a 9. Paul McCartney, I don't know. He might have been a 3, and then Ringo, I think, is a 6. So I don't know, but that's not going to be that meaningful for people unless you've already been deep into Enneagram. Well, as far as the individualist, individualists are going to reject things that are popular, and so there is like pretty much all like snobbery, elitism. I was into it before it was big, like pitchfork. Like this is all very Enneagram 4 stuff. And I do want to get to the planets, and then this will all kind of reveal what planet is what, and I think it'll make a little more sense. But each of us either gain self-esteem through being useful and helpful to others, or by doing a lot of, just achieving a lot in the world, or by being sort of elitist and rejecting what other people think is cool because we're searching for the real, we're searching for the authentic, we're searching for the deep. That's right, 2-4. Yeah. John Lennon's 2-4. Awesome. Thank you. Now. Okay, and then for the head center, 5-6-7, 3 ways of dealing with fear. And so the 5 deals with fear by learning as much as possible. The 5 will say, I'm okay if I'm not feeling, and you're okay if you're not making me feel. So the 5 wants to learn as a way to push away feeling because emotion is dangerous. And they have a fear of emotion, and their fears of the world are ultimately the fear of having to feel things. It goes deeper than that, but the 5 is basically a strategy of learning as much as humanly possible about something as a way of staving off fear. People think I'm a 5 because I know a lot. It's not that. I mean, the 5 actually might just study like some swamp wetland in Minnesota for 4 years or for 40 years. Like they might just study, I think Charles Darwin is probably a 5. A lot of them are scientists. A lot of them study like certain ecosystems or certain places. It's not that they even have such a voluminous knowledge of theory and intellect and philosophy. They might just have a deep knowledge of how a particular ecosystem in a particular swamp works. It's just like they have their thing that they're just like so into, and it's not a feeling thing. And it can be hard to tell 5s because 5s can sometimes seem very emotional, but like the 5's like worst fear is that you're going to tell them like, hey, I just want you to know you're a really special person for me and you've done a lot for me and I really appreciate you. They will just like leave the room if you tell them that, because they're feeling. They can't stand feeling. It's like, I'm okay if I'm not feeling. You're okay if you're not making me feel. The moment that you start to like get really gushy and make me feel stuff, then, I'm going to leave. And 5s are also the most miserly with their time. They can make a really big show of being generous, but the really big show of being generous is so they've like paid their dues and they don't have to be generous in the future. Like they don't want to be spontaneously generous. They don't want to be forced to be generous. They don't want to be, they ultimately, their worst nightmare is having to like get stuck in like small talk situations. And they're similar to the 4 in some ways. They're kind of in the same neighborhood as the 4. The 5s can have the 4 wing and 4s can have the 5 wing. But it's ultimately a way of dealing with fear. 6, that's what I have there. People are surprised. They think I must have 5, but I'm really not afraid of that. 6 is I'm okay if I'm safe. You're okay if you're safe. Everyone's okay if they're safe. And so the 6 is, the 6 is all about really safety and security, and they're loyal to things. Comment from Lasita. Her Enneagram teacher lives in Santa Fe, Carl Marsak, and he thinks Jane Goodall is a 5. I agree. I think she's an INTP in Myers-Briggs and an Enneagram 5. I've actually looked at her before. Let's see if, I wonder if they have Goodall here. They have her as, she's 5 tri-type. Okay, so they have her as a 9 with 5 in her tri-type. And 5 is secondary for her. So she's a 9-5 rather than the 9-2. So the order does matter. So, I mean, she's probably what would have been called a 5 anytime in Enneagram history up until the last few years, because only in the last few years has there been this huge movement that's realized that most people are 9s. Look at all these 9s. And then very few 1s and 2s and 3s. There's like the same amount of 3s actually are quite a lot, right? 3s are multiple pages. There's just as many 1s and 2s. There's like less 1s and 2s total of the people they've typed than all the 9s. And then 3s are one of the popular ones, pages of 3s. and then very few fours, handful of fours, very few fives. Well, actually, a decent amount. And then a ton of sixes. Look at all these sixes. Pages and pages and pages of sixes. A decent amount of sevens. Maybe sevens one of the more popular ones too now. But it could also be the people that they're typing, right? This isn't just like general public. These are like historically notable figures and so on. So it's a little bit different. But in any case, they have her as a 9 with a 5 as the secondary. But I would have typed her as a 5. But again, that's just what I would have thought, because she just seems. But I guess that's the real question: is like, is her fundamental issue that she doesn't want to feel, or is her fundamental issue that she wants to be included in some way? And that's the 9. Comes down to this fundamental need to be included in conversations and so on. So maybe the fact that Jane Goodall actually wanted to publish work and communicate with people and connect with people, and not just like be a hermit by herself with the monkeys. Although she spent a lot of alone time with the monkeys, so, or the apes, I guess they were gorillas, yeah. Or to communicate with them, that might have been more of a 9 thing. Yeah, 9s are also very playful. They say that the 9 wants to play. It's like, I'm okay if I can play with you, you're okay if you play with me. So the 9s sometimes get disturbed if things aren't kept in a playful way. So back to the head types though, the 5 investigator, very much avoiding feeling and trying to learn and intellectualize. The 6, the loyalist, who's looking for stability and safety. And then the 7 is the enthusiast, and they basically say, I'm okay if I'm not in pain, you're okay if you're not putting me in pain. It can also be phrased, I'm okay if I'm not trapped, and you're okay if you're not trapping me, because that's like depriving them of their new experiences that they might enjoy and consume new things and stuff like that. So the 7, their strategy for dealing with fear is to just go on to the next thing. New experience, new excitement, new relationship, new anything. Just move on and just try not to be trapped. So now we can look at what the actual numbers are from the astrological perspective. And this follows the Thema Mundi. So the Thema Mundi is that amazing classic, here's examples of it. A mythical horoscope used in Hellenistic time. And it follows it in the sense that the chart of the creation of the world. Yeah, and I think you reminded me of this, Rachel. I remember you brought it up like a couple months ago, and I was like, that's what it's called. I'd seen it before, but I forgot what it was called. So thanks for reminding me of the name. I used to talk about this with
it's
Chris Brennan.
basically it's basically the birth chart of the world.
Yeah,
so it's natal Earth the last time we incarnated, according to these people that like follow the Thema Mundi or whatever. So, and the reason why it's also so important is because it establishes, because of that, it establishes what is the dominating plan and hierarchy of rulership and exaltation and all that, based on the form of the earth that was born at that moment.
Yeah, I see it as kind of just a like fundamental order. Yeah, I mean, it is really just this fundamental order that it has so many different facts about it, right? Like the sun sextile to Venus gives it its sextile quality, and trine to Jupiter gives it its trine quality, and the moon opposing Saturn, and all these things, right? So, but in any case, the way we use it in the Enneagram is. It also shows a really interesting thing, because the Enneagram has been around for thousands of years, but it shows that just like astrology that's been around for thousands of years, what happened was in astrology, like, okay, we have planetary rulership of Mercury, Virgo, and Gemini, Venus, Taurus, and Libra, Mars, Scorpio, Aries, Jupiter, traditionally, Sagittarius, Pisces, and then Saturn for the last 2, Aquarius, Capricorn. And then, of course, with the discovery of Uranus, that replaced Saturn for Aquarius, and the discovery of Neptune replaced Jupiter for Pisces. So similar thing here. When you look at the Enneagram, the 3 is the sun. And so it really makes a lot of sense if you think of the 3, this achiever, this shining light. If you look at famous Enneagram 3s, like Tony Robbins kind of people, they're really like, they're kind of just like the shining sun. You know, they just want to achieve and do things, and they're kind of afraid of the dark and so on. Then we go to 2, that's the moon. It's like the sun and the moon. 3 and the 2. They actually have, there's another perspective of the Enneagram which combines aggressive, withdrawing, and compliant. And basically, the 3 is the compliant, is the aggressive compliant, and the 2 is the compliant aggressive. So 3 like appears aggressive, but they're truly compliant. 2 appears to be really compliant, but they're actually aggressive. And that's the sun and the moon, and they're kind of like the two main like luminaries. A lot of them are like larger than life kind of figures. So the sun and the moon, Leo and Cancer. Then you go to the 1, that's the mercurial type, that's Mercury. And that, of course, is Virgo and Gemini. Then you go to the 9, that's Venus. So to answer your question, Rachel, yeah, 9 is Venus. You can see it keeps going, right? Same pattern. That's Taurus and Libra. 8 would be Aries and or Scorpio. That is Mars. So when you definitely hit the nail on the head, because you were saying, is this Mars and Venus? We were talking about 8 and 1, but it's like, yeah, it's like 1 is Mercury, 9 is Venus, 8 is Mars, 7 is Jupiter. If you think about it, they're known for traveling, and they're expansive, and they love exploring, the world and taking in. It's very Sagittarian, and a lot of times they love eating food and just kind of like the nicer things in life. Like if you think of 9 and 7 are like the two most pleasant. They're like the kind of benefic of the Enneagram. 8 and 6 are the malefics. We have Mars, 8, and then 6 is Saturn, the very Saturnine loyalist. And then 5 is Uranus, eccentric, weird, unusual, kind of non-emotional. And then 4 is Neptune. And so it makes sense that there's so many movie stars that are 4s and people with rich imaginations and fantasizing and long distance relationships where they fantasize about the people and all this stuff, kind of typical of the 4 because they live in this rich fantasy world of Neptune. And some people have put Pluto in between 5 and 4 as this kind of void or gap, but as if it like spiraled or curled, like 3, 2, 1, kind of spiraling around. And then when it gets to 5 and 4, it like, instead of 4 going over to 3, it just like keeps curling back in, and then you have Pluto kind of in between 4 and 5. 1 is Mercury. So I'm a 1, so I'm the mercurial kind of messenger of the gods who has to like be in the middle of, and also like the police officer of the planets, and the sort of enforcer of the planets, and the goody two shoes of the planets, but always caught between am I good or am I bad, and like always kind of like Loki, right? Like a little bit questionable of like the fundamental question for the Enneagram 1 is like, am I truly good? And they're like asking themselves if they're actually good. And then, yeah, comment from Rachel, reforming is a Mercury thing, all prefix. Yeah, good point. Now it says super interesting correlations. Lasita says she feels it's important to see the good aspects and not the pathologies. Right, you're absolutely right. Like when we talk about like any of these can be negative. Like we have Donald Trump as an example of 8. Well, we also have Von Paul, and Von is this wonderful artist and protector, defender. I feel so safe having him around. I mean, I'm a 6. 6s love having 8s around because it's like having a watchdog. Like I just know, like he used to run a pizza place, and this is such an 8 thing. I'm a 1. If someone was trying to break into my shop, I'd call the cops. He was running a pizza place, and someone was trying to break in, and he snuck out the back and snuck up behind him and hit him in the head with a pipe. That's his, or a stick or something. That's his way of doing it. I'm like, wouldn't you call the police? He's like, why? What are they going to do? So it's like the 8 is just such an anti-authoritarian challenger, and but they're such a defender, as well. And as a 1, it's so funny, my friendship with Vaughn, because I'm a 1 and he's an 8, and I'm like, he calls me Officer Dempsey. That's what my mom used to call me. It's like I'm always trying to do the right thing and worried about doing the wrong thing and saying, you can't do that. And he'll say, yes, I can, and he has this whole like Bart Simpson anti-authoritarian thing. But yeah, it's really important to realize these are not pathologies. It's almost like cute. Like you can actually appreciate how weird everyone is, and you can appreciate how sweet it is that people actually like have different ways of caring, and that the 8 will care by challenging authority and will show you how much they care by defending. Even the 5, who can seem like they don't care, will show you how much they care by learning a lot about things and being really informed. And it's like, well, yeah, they might be afraid of feeling, but they're not afraid to show you how much they care by doing it their way, which is a language we might not speak, and we might miss seeing how much they care because we're expecting them to show it in a more emotional way, and they don't. They're showing it in a very mental way. So yeah. So, and then question from now, any tips when trying to learn astrology, Enneagram, objective personality at the same time? Yeah, I would say look at the same person that's been typed in all of them. So we have this database list here. And so you can find somebody who's been typed in objective personality, also typed in Enneagram, and then look at their human design. And you can kind of see that. Yeah, let me just find like the error table. Oh, I don't know what's going on here. Just a moment. Weird. Looks like we got a little glitch. Okay, I don't know what happened there. It looks like Zoom kind of glitched out. But I'm just going to go ahead and share a link here. So yeah, I think it's nice. I mean, there's two different ways to do it. You can kind of like depending on what you prefer, you either look for one pattern across a whole bunch of different people, or you look at one person with a whole bunch of different patterns, right? So you either have a very large sample set of like, okay, I just want to learn Enneagram. I'm just going to look at all these different Enneagram 8s. I'm going to look up Donald Trump, and then I'm going to look up, you can kind of look in that database list. Donald Trump's 8-wing 7. I'm going to look up Gene Simmons. I'm going to look up Barbara Walters. I'm going to look up Ted Nugent, Muhammad Ali, Bill O'Reilly, Saddam Hussein. These are all famous 8s. Kirk Douglas, Joan Jett, Courtney Love, Conor McGregor. These are all kind of intimidating, strong people. Peaches. And you just kind of look up all these 8s and you get the sense of what the 8 is about by looking at a bunch of different people. Or you look at one person and you're like, I want to look at them through the lens of Enneagram. I want to look at them through the lens of objective personality. And I want to look at them through the lens of human design. Yeah. And then Casey was saying that she can see her Enneagram more in the Vedic astrology big 3. Yeah, interesting. I wonder if certain astrological systems can actually predict this. For a long time, I was looking for predictions of Enneagram and personality, but I wasn't able to find them because I'd find people born very close together with very different types. So I just came to the conclusion that Enneagram and personality type are the personality crystal itself, not the body graph, not the chart. That's the conclusion I came to, but your mileage might vary.
Okay, one of the conclusions I came to is that Enneagram is more to do with nurture than nature. And it isn't so much a genetic thing as how you were brought up and the experiences you had as a child. And like the idea.
Yeah, that's a big debate in the community. Like some people say, like, if you're the eldest son, you're more likely to be, an 8 or a 1 or something like that. Like you're more likely to have had to have been strong and tough, but at the same time, that's actually controversial because there are I would say that is a currently open discussion in Enneagram communities. Is it nature? Is it nurture? But not even is it genetic. It's more like, is it beyond genetics and beyond upbringing? And that's a good question. I mean, the other question then would be, does your Enneagram change lifetime after lifetime? And if so, then the reincarnation research people are probably pretty wrong about things because it seems like what they're detecting is the same personality. That's kind of how they know it's the same person because they're seeing the telltale sign of someone. So like, if Elliott Smith comes back and he was a 4 and he's known for his deep melancholy and deep authenticity, no one would recognize him as the reincarnation of Elliott Smith unless they also recognize that same Enneagram 4, deep melancholy and deep authenticity and things like that. So, I mean, but then it's also just maybe he had an upbringing in each life that maybe that's the synchronicity, that you keep coming back with the same kinds of upbringings as well. It's a great question. It's a really good question. So I'm just saying that I wasn't able to find anything in the body graph. Like I wasn't able to find defined solar plexus people are this Enneagram type or, this profile. I looked and I ultimately kind of gave up because it seemed to me that it's looking at something different, that it's not exactly the same thing.
Well, so what I was coming across was this idea that if certain things happen in childhood, then you may tend to express so that one doesn't enneatype a child one wait for them to grow up and then see what comes out.
I agree. I agree. I mean, also just because it could be really damaging to put a child in a box like that, and that could be a real. I mean, it's sad that there are Enneagram communities that have a really bad rap. I've met somebody who grew up in one who kind of hates Enneagram because everything was explained by, oh, well, you're an 8, so of course you're going to do that. Well, of course this is the way it is. It's like putting people in a box in a really negative way. At the same time, there are some little kids who are the total pranksters, and I was definitely. I mean, my mom called me Officer Dempsey since I was 4 years old because I was total Officer Dempsey. You can't park there. You can't do this. That's against the rules. And then there's little kids who are 8s who are like the Bart Simpsons who are like throwing paper airplanes at their teacher. But I wouldn't tell them that they're an 8 or a 1 or try to teach them. I would kind of allow the children through part of like a rite of passage, like maybe as a teenager, to kind of grow into learning about that if they're drawn to it. But yeah, I totally am with you that there can be real damages to that. And there's a couple questions I want to just catch up on here. So Hanifa says she feels like she's a 1 wing 2, and which number is Saturn? Saturn was 6. I didn't think about what wing you are, but I agree with you being Ennea type 1, as we've discussed previously. Now is meaning to dig into the incarnation cross sequencing. Well, that is an incredible topic. And if you can figure out the other sequences, I'd love to hear. I've only figured out the base 2 sequence. The personality crystal is the same across incarnations. Yes. And, Rob was actually, at one point he said that the design crystal does not reincarnate. But then at another point, he said that when he had his encounter with the voice and got to see all of his reincarnations, that he saw both lines of incarnations. So he saw all the previous people his personality had been, but he also saw all the previous people that his design crystal had been. And he said that basically each of us are a combination of 2 lineages. Interesting idea, right? It's kind of like promiscuous. Like your design crystal could have been with a different personality crystal in the last life. And maybe it's with a different personality crystal each time. They're kind of strange bedfellows, right? And you've had many different design crystals in past lives. And so it's kind of a cute idea that there's actually 2 lineages of past lives. So to say that you used to be someone is only half true, because only half of you used to be them in some sense. And and these are difficult questions. I see some comments from Rachel and Casey. And these are difficult questions. But well, I think this was a wonderful discussion. I hope that the planetary stuff made it at least somewhat relevant to human design. And as far as my incarnation cross sequencing research, yeah, I've shared that around. I think it's on Signpost in some places. I mean, I can share some things with you. It's not that I've really written a lot as much as I sequenced out the full sequence of base 2, just based on Ra's notes. Maybe we can do incarnation sequencing next week. Maybe we'll just make that the next Human Design Catalyst. That would be a fun topic to go into. We could do reincarnation and incarnation sequencing, and that we can look at some reincarnation cases and then see if they fit into the sequence and things like that. That would be cool. I only have the base 2 sequence, so if there's anybody that we have very accurate birth times for that are base 2, let me know, and we can try to see where they would fit in that sequence, and that would be a fun thing to do. Yeah, you're base 2. That's right, Rachel. Yeah. So, yeah, and if there's any final questions or thoughts or comments, otherwise I'm going to take a short break before our personality night. So, thank you again for everyone being so enthusiastic about exploring these topics, and hope you enjoyed some of the connections to the planetary archetypes. I do think it's kind of fun getting to know the planets through the lens of Enneagram. You're like, if the planet were a person, how would it act? Oh, that checks out. Mars would be Bart Simpson, Mercury would be Lisa, right? As we figured out. So, okay, well, thanks all. And what a fun catalyst. I will be back in about 15 minutes for our objective personality class, where we have special guest James Alexander, and we'll be typing him using the objective personality checklist. So, see you all shortly. Take care.